Okay, I'm recording to the cloud. Can you see it's recording, Will? Oh yeah, I got it. I see a recording thing. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to Social Science Week. I'm John Healy from Charles Sturt University, sitting in for Will Dobard, who's in an airplane flying over Vancouver. And I'm coming to you from Gundungurra country up in the Blue Mountains, in the town of Katoomba. So tonight we have, or whatever time it is where you are, and if you'd like to say where you're coming from, it'd be really great to see that in the chat. Also check out see if the chat's working. I might just add some details for Jasmine here in the chat as well. Hey, Kylie. So tonight we've got Jasmine MacDonald, who was a student, as we all were. She was a student of Charles Sturt University, and thank God is no longer. Yeah. Tonight, we're going to have a talk on engaging young children in nature play by Jasmine, who's a research fellow at the Australian Institute of Family Studies. Also, I put in the link to Jasmine's personal page because you can check out some of her other resources and also some blogs. I was earlier listening to a blog about dog psychology, around dog psychology, by a Finnish researcher, Mia Maria, and it was really cool. You really get a good taste of how Jasmine presents from those. That we will get a taste right now. Thank you. Introducing Jasmine. Thanks for coming along tonight.
Lovely. Thank you, John. I appreciate the introduction. Lovely to see the faces and the names pop up. So nice to have a community of folks to share research with. I'm going to talk to you about the work that we're doing at the Australian Institute of Family Studies around nature play and early years. But yeah, nice to have a mention of the podcast and the blog and other research that I've done. So you can check that out on the website. I pretty much just use that as an excuse to meet interesting people. It's kind of technically how I met Will, an excuse to talk to him about his research. And it's now my second episode about dogs because I like dogs a lot. So I get to tailor it to whatever I like. Okay, so I would like to, I'm just going to shuffle this. I'd like to shout out and say I'm coming to this presentation from NAM and acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise a continuing connection to lands and waters. I pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past and present. In NAM, those are the peoples of the Kulin Nation, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, and the Bunurong Bunurong peoples. I thought it might be kind of nice to start with some background about what AFES is, but just really briefly. So the Australian Institute of Family Studies is an independent research institute, but part of the federal government. And so we take on projects funded by a range of different government institutes, but also funding bodies more broadly on lots of different areas. And we use a lot of different research methods. But at the core of everything we do is increasing the well-being of children and families. So the team that I'm a part of is Child Family Community Australia. And I love my job because I get to use my nerdy PhD and research background to be able to create evidence-based resources for folks working on the front lines with children and families. So we're funded by Department of Social Services, and the intent is to increase evidence use in practice. And to do this, we talk to or reach out to the 60,000 subscribers we have across the country, mostly social workers and psychologists, and ask them what are the practice issues that they're facing and the evidence needs that they have. And so one of the evidence packages we created, or a bundle of resources to support people working with children and families, was an early years nature play package. And this is a piece I want to talk to you about today, this engaging young children 0 to 5 years in nature play. This is a piece that I led with backup from two great collaborators, Kylie Butler and Dr. Crystal Alla. And yeah, share some interesting insights about this that are nice and practical, and also just kind of intuitive. It feels nice to say, yeah, there's benefits to get out into nature. But still, I have a little bit more of a segue, because I really want to emphasize the content that we create is really broad. And so beyond the interest that you have in nature play and early years, it's really likely we'll have other content that you're interested in. So this is a screenshot of just the most recent resources that we've published. All of this is freely accessible on our website. We actually have a couple of new resources that aren't shown on here because they were published since I took this screenshot, and Will and I have worked with the team to create some resources on doing trauma-informed research and evaluation. But you can see there's a wide range of topics that we cover. Child protection tends to be a big part of what our audience is interested in. And this one at the top, why are children spending more time indoors? This is like a bit of a sister resource for what I'm talking about today, because it's like, when kids aren't in nature play, why aren't they outside? What's the things that Australian kids are doing indoors that's keeping them indoors? And then a little bit more of a spruik is about our webinar program. So research evidence doesn't always have the answer for what's best in practice. It's often not up to date with what practitioners are doing in the field. And so at least once a month, we do a webinar with, usually we'll have a researcher, we'll have a practitioner, and often we'll have someone with lived experience as well, to be able to talk about really important research and practice issues. So recently we've done one on supporting parents with intellectual disability and navigating cultural differences and ethical dilemmas when working with culturally and linguistically diverse families. Okay, so that's enough of the background, but I think these are really cool resources that will be of interest to some folks here, so I wanted to mention those. So for this evening, I want to talk to you about findings of a rapid review of international literature to increase evidence-based insights for practice with children and families. And the practice guide and the findings are, first off, really useful for practitioners who work with children and young people and their caregivers. But also anyone who's got a little one in their family or in their workplace, there's useful information for this. And the side effect benefit is that if we are keeping the kids in our families in nature, it means we also get to be in nature, and it's actually good across the lifespan. So I'm going to start first with talking about what nature play is. I want to do a little bit of explanation of why it's important to think about nature play in early years. And then most of what I'm going to talk about is the factors that impact the likelihood of kids being in nature and engaging in nature play, and ways that we can support parents to involve young children in nature play. I think I've made it apparent that I'm a research nerd, and I'm not going to bore you this evening with details of the method or limitations, but if this is something that excites you and you want to talk about the kind of research methods behind this, please reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation about that. So what is nature play? Nature play is a specific type of play that's freely chosen, child-led and unstructured, as opposed to adult-led. So in this context, parents are the backup and they're the co-explorers. They're not the captains, they're not leading the expedition. It includes interactions with natural elements like trees, rocks, plant, dirt, and water. And nature play activities tend to be physical, imaginative, sensory rich, and collaborative, and involve being curious about the surroundings, being creative, and solving problems. So it's really important to say up front, definitely not saying we need to let kids go completely rogue, especially in ages 0 to 5. but giving permission for the adults in the lives of young people to not have to have the answers, not have to have a schedule or a structure for kids to play to all the time. A key message would be that Australian families and families probably in lots of other countries as well, wanting to provide enrichment activities and different kinds of classes and supports for their kids. And what we're kind of advocating for is to acknowledge those things aren't better or worse than unstructured play, but research shows that it's a combination of things that's good for kids. So we want to kind of avoid having kids just on devices or just doing homework or, you know, instrument lessons at the expense of also being out in nature. Because it's important to have unstructured play, because this leads to unexpected problems to solve, and that increases resilience because kids are learning through experience how to solve problems. And it means there's risk, it means there's a chance for failure, and unfortunately for the person doing laundry in the home, it also means lots of dirty clothes. So what does nature play look like? Like, how can we do nature play? I've got on the next couple of slides some cost-effective ways to do nature play. But the thing I want to emphasize the most is the cool thing about this is there is no one size fits all. So if you have a little one who is super energetic and loves to be moving, then that can look like, you know, throwing stuff, balancing on things, climbing over things. But if you have less space, or you're working with, you know, living with a little one who isn't as energetic, is kind of more reserved, or you've just had a really busy day and you don't want to be running around outside, nature play can also look like observing, describing, and smelling. So stuff you could do. Could create shapes, letters, or objects with loose items. You could have a picnic or a camp out in the backyard. Make a mud kitchen is one of my favorites. You could use a magnifying glass to explore insects and flowers. You could feel the grass and leaves or smell flowers and plants, and use your body in different shapes, patterns, speeds, and directions when outside. You could try laying on the ground and looking at shapes of swaying trees, clouds, and stars. You could talk about what you can see, hear, and feel outside. Record information about insects and objects that you see, or plants and objects outside. Make an obstacle course over or around natural objects, or balance and climb on rocks, boulders, and logs. So just really briefly, I want to touch on why should we focus on nature play in children's early years? So early childhood, or 0 to 5 years, is a critical period for learning and development. A child's identity, knowledge, capabilities, and skills develop significantly in this time, and is influenced by family, communities, culture, and place. Engagement in play provides important opportunities for children to develop in their early years. It fosters exploration, curiosity, and imagination. It allows them to exercise agency. It expands their thinking and enhances interest in learning. Okay, so the kind of meatier part of the presentation and all the talk tonight is factors that impact engagement in nature play. So we know that nature play has a range of benefits, but we're now working out more and more through emerging research of what makes it more or less likely that a child will engage in nature play. And so our research has shown 3 different factors. One is access to green spaces. The next is child-related characteristics. And then finally, we'll spend kind of more time talking about this because there's multi issues or factors here around parent health and safety concerns. But before I push on, I just want to say up front, research has not done a good job at thinking about the individual needs of families, especially families with children with disability, And so that means if you're a practitioner working with families, or you're a parent or a caregiver listening to this stuff and thinking about applying it, just want to acknowledge that up front. For families, go with what suits your ability and comfort. And for practitioners, make sure you're taking into account the expertise of the people that you're working with about what suits their needs and their abilities. Okay, so access to green spaces. Having access to green spaces or greening existing spaces like preschools or playgroups can increase children's engagement in nature play. Unsurprisingly, children are more likely to engage in unorganized or creative free play in green spaces compared to non-green spaces. I've kind of talked about what this can look like, jumping over or walking on, carrying and throwing materials, sensory exploration, and, stuff to hide behind and climb through. One of the findings that I really enjoyed was that using grass or sand to green spaces compared to asphalt, like in playgrounds in schools, provides a sense of safety for kids. It means they're more likely to climb on stuff because it's less scary, or the impacts are less negative when they fall down. But maybe my favorite thing is schools that greened spaces found that kids were just more likely to lay down and rest or have a nap. And that makes me really happy. The yin and yang of, we want kids to run around, but we also want them to take space and relax when they need. So, asphalt playgrounds or spaces for kids isn't conducive to that. All right, so in terms of access to green spaces, some practice tips. Keep in mind that most outdoor spaces can be suitable for nature play. They don't have to be large or remote. We could be talking about time spent in a backyard, courtyard, or on a balcony, walking around the block and just paying attention to trees or plants or discussing the weather, and time spent in local parks, walking trails, or visiting nature reserves. Encourage parents to provide regular sessions of outdoor play in natural spaces, and even better if this is during a time that the family would usually spend indoors with manufactured toys or electronic devices. And also look for a variety of natural elements and soft green spaces to get all those different verbs happening, right? Climb, roll, jump, rest, all these different things. It's not about, as I said before, it's not about eliminating structure, play, or enrichment altogether, but it's about variety. So in greening spaces at home, there's lots of really cool materials that can be stacked and built and create shapes with, like sticks of different lengths, dirt, gravel, or sand, leaves and small plants, stones and pebbles, or gum nuts, bark, and feathers. And I really like that last one because you get that sensory image already, or a sense of what that would feel like, and that being really kind of cool and engaging for kids. And pot plants or planter boxes are really good as well, especially where we've got small or concrete outdoor spaces, and because it's plant materials that can be adjusted to the height of children that are going to use them. Okay, so our second factor of what are the things that increase or decrease the likelihood of kids engaging in nature play is child-related characteristics. So individual differences between kids can affect the kinds of activities they feel comfortable exploring and their engagement in nature play. And this goes through to adulthood. Parents and carers are going to have their own preferences as well that were formed or influenced by their early years. So kids that are shy, nervous, or lack confidence, probably less likely to engage in that kind of riskier, fast-paced nature play. But if a kid likes being outdoors, doing adventurous activities, getting wet or dirty, all these things probably make it more likely that they'll engage in that fast-paced nature play. And these preferences are influenced by previous experience, and that's cool because it means it can change over time. So a child's confidence can grow with repeated opportunities to interact with natural environments and with support from adults and peers. So some tips when it comes to child-related characteristics. Parents, educators, and peers can help nervous or less confident kids develop strategies to support them during nature play and increase their enjoyment with unfamiliar activities. So a couple of strategies. One, we use this as adults, like positive self-talk. Kids need to learn that. So encouraging them to talk through a tricky situation they're in. So it might be they're climbing a tree and they look like they're getting stuck. Instead of, cautiously telling them to stop or, being worried, it might be getting them to talk out loud about how they're going, how they're feeling, and what the next move is. Kids can also navigate physical barriers in ways that feel safe to them. So maybe it's using both hands and feet when they're balancing on rocks or if they're crossing a stream. And the role of adults and peers is really important. So watching and imitating peers is really effective, even through preschool years. That enhances a sense of engagement with nature play, and to try challenging activities with a friend. All right, so we've covered 2 of the 3 factors that I want to talk about that impact engagement in nature play. And the last one, and the most important one in terms of the bulk of evidence that's come through, is parent health and safety concerns. So international research provides insights in this space and suggests that some of the things keeping parents from engaging their little ones in nature play is stuff like fear of accidents and injuries, exposure to allergens, exposure to diseases, and poor weather conditions. It's either too hot or it's too cold. And the kinds of stuff that came out from parents and also educators is like not having proper protective clothing or equipment, being concerned about sun exposure or insect and snake bites. Now, the thing that's kind of interesting about this is we saw really big differences from countries that are kind of clustered together with similar attitudes, like what's on the slide here, Australia, the US, and Canada, that were kind of in stark comparison to Scandinavian countries, where parents and educators tended to encourage kids to be outside regardless of weather. And this was seen as a way to improve health. It was a positive thing, regardless of the weather. It was actually seen to be more likely to improve health outcomes to have kids out in the snow, provided that, snow or all different kinds of weather, provided they had the equipment or the gear that they needed. So some tips in thinking about this. So practitioners working with families can think about discussing with parents the potential benefits of nature play, but also giving parents the opportunity to discuss concerns that they have and acknowledge those concerns. So, ask parents if there's things that might impact their child's capacity to engage. Remember that nature play can look totally different from family to family, and encourage parents to choose physical or sensory activities that they feel are safe for their child's unique needs. We can encourage parents to consult with a GP or a pediatrician about specific health risks, and discuss parent concerns about weather. And rather than using or seeing weather as this barrier, actually using it as a way to have conversations with them and plan with the little ones about wearing appropriate clothes, checking out weather forecasts beforehand, and what protective clothing or gear might be needed. Okay, I'm like this close to the end of the presentation. This was a bit of a complicated area in drawing up the research, and there's 3 more points really briefly that I want to highlight because they're pretty interesting. So the first is, probably this is, you've got a sense of this already, but parents and adults tend to perceive that young children lack physical or cognitive capacity to assess risk and their own abilities. So this can result in adults restricting the activities that children participate in, which then can reduce the child's confidence to try new things. And this is pretty cool. Like, this is the social psych stuff, right? Parents in a family or school community are also influenced by the ways parents in a family or school community can also influence one another in the ways that affect the likelihood of children engaging in nature play. So parents may change their behaviors based on how they think other adults will judge them. And that kind of perceiving, if something goes wrong and I already have other teachers, parents, or family members around me that didn't want, you know, the kids in our family going out and exploring, then this is going to look really bad on me. Language use, unsurprisingly, plays a factor here. The research shows that the language that parents and educators use can discourage children from engaging in nature play. So the first part of this is that cautionary language. Slow down, you know, be careful, or not so high. That kind of stuff can increase a sense of anxiety and fear in kids, and kids that might otherwise be kind of capable or excited to explore might learn from their parents or adults around them that this isn't an okay thing to do. And from a kind of gendered perspective, adults sometimes use cautionary language differently with male and female children. So an Australian study of early childhood educators found that educators more frequently assisted girls verbally and physically in nature play, but challenged boys to do things independently. Now, this kind of sucks. And the reason that this sucks, you know, I think probably it's intuitive of why it sucks, but research on nature play shows kids in nature playing with natural materials don't naturally divide into gender, or even influenced by what it's like at home. They don't go into gender roles when they're playing in nature. So when educators are there kind of implicitly encouraging these kind of gender differences, that's where we start to see these restrictions be placed, particularly in this case on girls. And then finally, this kind of last point I wanted to highlight is it's important for us to keep in mind, if we're, you know, parents ourselves, but also in working with parents and caregivers, are always balancing safety with exploration. Parents and educators may experience conflicts between thinking nature play is really beneficial, wanting to get kids outside, wanting to give them more space, but also feeling, you know, at the same time nervous or hesitant. And it can be hard for adults to know like how much risk or adventure is healthy for development and at what point they should intervene. So in supporting parents to facilitate child autonomy, it's important to be conscious of how the language adults use influences child autonomy, to consider how frequently and for what purpose parents tell children what to do, where to go in a play space, or use cautionary language. So have a think about if there really is a risk that needs to be addressed, or if it might be like a bit of a discomfort that we're personally feeling, that we can just take a beat and see what happens next. Consider if it might be appropriate for the child to think about and verbalize what they'll do next. So, you know, where they're going to put their hands next if they're climbing a tree, and be aware of possible gender bias and offer verbal or physical assistance according to individual need, not gender. And this is kind of my last content slide. Reassure children that it's okay to try and fail with tricky activities. Like that, I think even as adults, we forget that. It's fun and it's messy and it's okay to fail. Try to involve children in assessing the risks and benefits of various play activities. And encourage children to be curious about nature and ask questions. This can help teach respect and mindfulness in outdoors, and can help children learn boundaries and risks when interacting with nature. Apologies. Okay, so I'm going to close down my slides in a sec, but I want to pop this up here for a moment, because if you have a device you can easily scan this with, that'll take you to the full paper. And this is my contact information for APES. But I'm also really active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And so if there's any of this stuff you want to follow up on, I also just like to keep connected with other practitioners and folks who are interested in social sciences. And as John mentioned, we've got my website to check out for the stuff that I do outside of APES and the podcast. So I think I will finish up there, and maybe we see if we've got time for a bit of a chat, John.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jasmine. That was great. I'm glad you mentioned adults at the end, because I was constantly just thinking these things were useful for me to think about.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And like we mentioned, I'm a dog lover, right?
Yeah.
I did some national media on this piece, and I remember one of the journos saying to me, "Do you have kids? Do you let them do this?" And I was
Mm.
like, "Look, I have a dog, and I'm always like, oh, is she going too fast? Where's she playing?" Like, it's important to normalize. You're gonna have anxieties when you care about something, but just
Yeah.
knowing, is it me? And I need to
Yeah.
not project that. And for us to remember, get out in nature and lay on the grass. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So any kind of questions or comments for anybody? Undo your mic or um
I'll make a comment if that's okay.
oh, hey Kelly, thanks.
That's okay. It's really interesting that you're saying about adults being able to enjoy nature as well. I was working alongside a group of children, and they were aged 4 and 5, and there was this amazing hill next to this playground that we're at, and none of them rolled down it. And
What?
it really, I don't know, it intrigued me. I was like, why? So all of a sudden I started to roll down it, and the children was like, what are you doing? They'd never had that experience of rolling down the side of a hill. So I've actually found myself being quite a role model in that state. And
Unintended.
yeah, and exactly, and climbing trees and actually taking risks that, that it's like you're saying, it's okay not to get it right, and it's okay to give things a try and see what happens. So thank you. I'm a early childhood educator, so I really value your research. So thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, Kylie. And I'm sure you had fun doing that yourself. Like, who doesn't like rolling down a hill? That's awesome.
Mm. There's a comment in the from JM. Can you see that in the chat?
Jennifer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it very interesting that you said parents change their behaviors according to how they may perceive their community values. Yeah, and I mean that wasn't a finding that I expected. It makes a lot of it makes a lot of sense, but it's also a little bit sad, I think, that we can. Yeah, I think probably this is broader than nature play as well, is keeping in mind that parenting doesn't and raising a family doesn't happen in a vacuum. We're always kind of influenced by other people for better or worse. And yeah, it's an interesting one, Jennifer, for sure.
Mm. And Narelle, would you like to say a little bit more why you would like to be studied?
Sure. Jennifer McCormack, who just spoke, and
Yeah.
I run a forest school in Queensland. And we're also co-founding members of the Australian Forest School Association. And
Awesome.
we've been working in wild nature for about 6 years or much longer, but together. And we are aware that there needs to be more research, and it's a new type of concept. Because it's a bit beyond nature play, what we do now.
Yeah.
And we're more adventure therapy and other things. And I think the more research that can be done, the better, because it all helps inform government and society and community and helps change opinions. So I would love to speak with you further, and I'm sure Jennifer would too.
Yeah, I'm really keen for that, and would love to set up a time to chat. I also was at the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Conference in the Gold Coast in March and met a couple of other folks presenting on nature play and adventure play as well. So if maybe we could hook up sometime via email or have a conversation over a coffee online sometime, think about what we have to share with each other, but also what those folks are doing. And I think from a research perspective, like reflecting what you're saying, Narelle, is we found it really tricky to come up with the definition of what is nature play and what's included and what's not, because every program looks totally different and has elements, like mixed elements of all different kinds of things in their programs. And it's like, probably everything is beneficial in a different way from a research perspective, and thinking about, you know, bringing this together and comparing programs, it actually gets really tricky.
It sure does. And with the Australian Forest School Association, we admit that there's a spectrum of nature play and businesses, and we're probably at that end of the spectrum, but it's completely fine to be at the other end as well, and everything in between,
Yeah,
because being outdoors is what it's all about.
totally.
Yeah, great. Here, Lorena's brought up a good point, and you kind of mentioned something around this, where people live, how much that depends on how they engage in nature play.
Yeah. Yeah, and this kind of got a little bit tricky in the research because some of the research, like Telethon Kids has done some cool stuff looking at families in urban spaces and how many major roads or you know, the potential barriers between local green spaces and you know, community areas. That kind of stuff starts to get a little more tricky about the extent to which that impacts engagement in nature. But I think that a key thing we can take away is in urban areas, it just is hard to have that variety and have that wide open running, climbing on stuff. But trying to emphasize that it can look really different. It doesn't just have to be high paced, but thinking about adding different elements, even inside, like bringing in leaves and gum nuts and all that kind of cool stuff to build sensory exposure. Those are kind of good ways to focus on building nature play in urban spaces. But yeah, absolutely is a big difference, and a lot of kind of geographical or risk factors to take into account, right? Like we talked with families in consultation for this of being just living on a farm and being able to just let their kids run in the backyard as compared to maybe someone living in a city and not being comfortable with their kids to walk to a local park because of how far it is and major roads. So yeah, it's an important thing to take into account for sure.
Are you reading that last comment there?
I love your comment that nature spaces need a variety to get the verbs going. Yeah, that was a comment from Jennifer. I think it's a good way to think about it. I am not a grammar nerd, but I am a fan of music, and there's an Incubus song that's like, love is a verb, it's a doing word. And so I keep that in mind with this, right? Is like the things that we want kids to do is sense and feel, but all that stuff to be tied together with actions, rolling, climbing, resting, all those things.
When you talked about the weather and Nordic countries, I was in Sweden, and we were kind of working with children a bit, and I was talking about, oh, the weather's really bad, and they all looked at me and sort of scowled and said, John, there is no bad weather, there's only bad choice of clothing.
Yes, I love
You
that.
you have to dress better next time.
Yeah, it's a good point. Definitely.
Yeah. So they had kids like totally dressed up in these things out in the dirt or the snow it didn't matter what it was. They were outside all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, we were looking up Scandinavian research and education models, and some of the assessments kids are doing is like the forest out the back of their school. They would go and choose a tree that they would visit once a semester and note the differences in the tree and form this relationship and kind of learn about seasons and change through having this connection with the tree. And I thought that couldn't be any further removed from what my primary schooling was like.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also thinking there's as far as different environments in the cities or in urban spaces, there is a lot to do, but it's usually illegal or dangerous. Like, do you know what I mean? If you climb things in the city, they're usually not things that are meant to be climbed.
Yeah, that's a good point, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah,
do it as they grow a bit into
and
teenage.
we kind of like start to shift into hostile design because in cities, like, you know, to deter people from climbing or sitting or skating on stuff, cities find ways to you know, put spikes or metal things, you know, jutting out to avoid that kind of engaging and interacting with environment.
That's really, really good point, because yeah, as far as something like skating goes, the young people are engaging in the environment, and the councils are putting in little knobs and things to stop the so people do want to engage with their environment. Any more questions? Doug was just saying it was a great presentation.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Doug.
Anything else to add, Doug? Where's he gone? We met Doug a few weeks ago, a few months ago, maybe it was.
Cooking dinner for the little people. Love it. Love your work, Doug.
Cooking for the leprechauns. In Ireland, that's what we call the little people, the leprechauns. Okay, that's great. We'll have a recording of the whole thing, hopefully, because I pressed record, and it should come to me, and we'll be adding it to the General Social Science Week's website or whatever is there, so people can revisit or look at it later. What's that, Lauren? Did you want to ask a question? So you unmuted.
Oh, so I don't know if you can hear
Oh,
me.
yeah, just.
I don't know if this is probably going into a whole other topic, but it's obviously the technology and the impact of engaging in nature. And you're saying, you know, a lot of people want to engage. So I've got a history of working in child protection, and I've seen over the last decade that shift of obviously that addiction and parents just not knowing how to manage it. And they're, you know, reverting back to their old childhood of like, you know, just get outside. Just get outside. So you're saying people want to engage, but then they don't as well. So it's really difficult to do that. So I just want to know, like, have you guys looked at that as being like one of the main areas of why people aren't engaging, like, as well?
Yeah, I think we didn't really find anything in that space, but that makes a lot of sense to me, what you're describing. And I guess what it encourages us to do is to zoom out and think, okay, broadly speaking, we can say kids and parents want to engage with nature, and it makes sense. And then we zoom out a little bit and go, oh, well, there's homework, and there's also swimming lessons, and there's also, you know, depending when that's happening, that could be nature play, but, you know, those kind of structured indoor swimming pool lessons, all these enrichment activities that compete for time in school. But if we zoom out further, we should also acknowledge that lots of families are living with a range of different complex needs and challenges, you know, around child protection and safety, mental health, and all of this competes for time and capacity. And there's very likely families and situations where this could be something that they'd be interested in, but they have these other urgent needs, which might result in not quite what we're talking about here, but like, you know, like you're saying, Lorena, it's, you know, okay, just go outside. Because in that situation, it's less about providing an opportunity for play and learning. It's probably more about respite and space for parents in that situation. And kids
don't, you know, just go out and play.
Yeah.
And it's such a foreign concept to a lot of young people now.
Yeah.
Especially urbanization, and, you know, there's obviously a big shift in people's, I guess, thoughts around being outside in general.
Yes.
It's a very open-ended kind of just get outside and play, or, you know, someone mentioned before, kids not even being able to roll down a hill. Like, there's just not this organic stuff that we have anymore. It's
a good point, that shift in I guess it seems maybe a point that's going to be more and more relevant for primary school years and up as well, that expectation of what it means to spend recreational time and be influenced by what friends are doing. And I feel like I had something else there on the tip of my tongue, but I've lost it. Apologies, Lorena. Take your point and think it's important, and very likely is going to impact, like, you know, the foreignness of just expecting kids to go outside and play and know what to do with that. And even more important for us to think about making sure that's a part of people's experiences in those early years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Will, I don't know, he texted me. He was noting how just asking to get someone to go out and play, and the notion of the meaning in that, or the meaning making of it. And like in my mind, yeah, well, I actually don't know what it is these days. But I guess when I was really young, a long time ago, and told to go out to play, I don't think my parents would have had any idea of what that meant either. Like, you know, like they just were, that was just a natural thing to say. Go out and play, had nothing prescriptive to it.
Yeah, I agree. Look, and my parents didn't demonstrate what going out and playing was, but because I was doing it from such a young age, I had that ability to have imagination to go out and keep myself busy, be it, you know, in the backyard or wherever. I just knew what to kind of do to fill the time. And I've just noticed, yeah, a lot of kids, parents are still saying that stuff, but they struggle so much to even think of what to do when they step outside.
Yeah, I mean, the more we talk about this, Lorena, the more I'm like really fascinated on this point, because, you know, the argument I'm trying to make here is provide less structured play and get kids doing less structured things. But if all they've known is structure, then that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like it might be gradual progression of providing a little bit of structure. It's like it's some folks I talk to about this talk about like you know, you give a kid a gift and they play with the box.
Yeah.
And that's kind of exactly what we're talking about here, is like maybe you can start by being out in nature and having a broad activity. But when a kid gets, I just saw Will's message, when a kid gets sidetracked and distracted and starts playing with leaves instead of playing with a ball with you, like go with that, take their lead. Yeah, it's a really interesting point.
It seems easier, like say, and like I've been going to the beach a lot lately and seeing families going to the beach. It seems like there's a lot of good context there. It seems easier. The children seems to have a choice of what to do, you know, like go in the water, dig holes, find things. And it's like the structure is there. The ability to partake in a lot of that stuff is embedded in just going there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that seems to have context rather than, yeah, like saying just go out and play. Yeah, but there is actually context if at a place like a beach or an organized park. But I'm also taking on Will's point of being less structured. I don't know, but it's a balance, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry.
So Doug has said, just wanted to say that the non-structured outdoor play is key. Or loose but safe enough with a person who can keep kids safe is just what we need. Don't overthink it. I'm a youth worker, and it's what I do every day with kids with complex trauma and ASD, autism spectrum disorders. Great job, thanks. Yeah, nice one.
Yeah. So any more? Oh, Will, fun, safe, useful. Will's in an airplane. That's neither fun, safe, nor useful. So I guess if there's nothing else, Jasmine, thanks
Yeah,
so much. And like I said, it'll be the recording, it'll be up. Other people can check it out. And just congratulations. Thanks for a nice talk.
amazing. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody.
Really good to see you again too.
Agreed.
Okay, so everybody's just saying thank you. I'll just wait for all the thank yous, just not to turn it off.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Someone's already emailed me. Excellent.
Cool. Yeah. We'll ask Will about the recording. We'll get onto him. Whoa, we'll ask Will about that too. Okay, so thanks everybody. Tomorrow night at 6, I think me and Will and Susan Milchek are going to have a discussion around learning and conversation through learning. It'll probably be just a conversation, I imagine, with bits and pieces of some theory. I think me and Will have actually realized we have actually got a pedagogical approach, and it's like a surprise to both of us. So we're really chuffed with that.
That was awesome.
Thanks again, Jasmine, and see you soon. And see you, everybody. Thanks for coming. See you at some others in the week.
Awesome.
Ending. Bye.